Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
John Hunter is a journalist who has worked on newspapers before joining the David Hall Publishing House, where he wrote about coarse, sea and game fishing. He was editor-in-chief of Tackle and Guns for 17 years and is now editor of Tackle Trade World. He has also organised the fishing village at the Game Fair for the last 5 years. As you can see, we have plenty to talk about. John, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me this morning on the Fly Culture Podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, very good, thank you. It's as I'm speaking to you at the moment, it's a very nice day. So, I should be out and about later on enjoying it.
Fantastic. I'm hoping we've had some heavy rain here this morning, which I'm hoping will push through. I've got a friend of mine and a contributor of Fly Culture, Stephen Murgatroyd, down in Devon. So I'm hoping to catch up with him and do some fishing. So I'd like some rain for the rivers, but I'd like not too much that we can still go fishing tomorrow. But I'd like to start things really because there is so much to talk about. But before we do that, I'd really like to get a sense of you as an angler, because in the description or the introduction at the very beginning, obviously you haven't said that you're a passionate fly angler, and that goes without saying. But I'd like to get a sense of you as an angler. And how would you really describe what the perfect day on the water is for you, and where would that be?
Firstly, I think it would be somewhere where I've got a good chance of catching a few fish, although that's not the be-all and end-all, but it's certainly, to me, that helps. I absolutely love dry fly fishing, and I love sight fishing. I've been very fortunate over the years to have had access to some lovely water down on the chalk streams of southern England, and that's probably where my heart is, just because of the opportunities that presents. So with that in mind, a southern chalk stream with a couple of mates targeting some free rising trout would be absolute bliss. If the weather's half decent, so much the better. But that's really where I would come at it from as an ideal day.
And you said fishing with a couple of mates. Do you how does that fishing with a couple of mates day sort of go? Do you sort of share a rod in effect and walk up the river together, or do you sort of set up and say, right, I'll see you at lunchtime? How do you sort of plan that?
It varies. The majority of the time I like to wander along with whoever my fishing companion or companions are, have a little chat as we go. I don't fish. I fish for fun. I don't fish competitively or particularly seriously. It's about having a great day out. So I'll have a wander along and target a few fish, and we'll probably take it in turns. Particularly if one of us has been unsuccessful on a fish, it might be, somebody else's turn. Having said that, there's usually a point of the day where I think I should have probably put a couple more fish on the bank, or they think the same thing. So we'll actually diverge and go and catch. We'll diverge and go for a little wander for a bit of peace and quiet. Come back, swap a couple of sob stories or whatever, and then sit down over lunch. A glass of wine and something cool to eat, and before we recharge for the afternoon. And that really is the way that my days tend to go, and it's all the better for that. I will say I do like meeting the riverkeeper first thing and having a good old chat, about what's catching and what's working, but equally just about the work that they've put in, and how they have changed a beat or how they've changed a particular stretch of the river, because that helps me in my understanding of what they're about, and I appreciate the efforts that go in to the fishing that we end up doing.
Cool. And you say chalk streams. Does that mean you are located in that sort of vicinity, or is it a longer journey for you to get there?
It's a longer journey. I'm up in the Midlands, so there aren't that many up here. And although I do fish the occasional still water, my running water is a thing for me. I have done a little bit of stuff on the Derbyshire Wye, and that's been absolutely wonderful. And at least once a year I try and get there, maybe twice a year, because there's some phenomenal fishing there. But generally, it tends to be the test or occasionally the itching, just because that's where I've got a few connections, and it allows me to get down there and see friends of mine. A couple of the keepers are friends of mine, so that makes it all the more reason to go down there and catch up with these guys. Some of them I've known. I'm giving my age away here, but there's one particular estate where the river keeper used to be this lad's father, and I used to take him a bit of fishing kit down when he was a lad, and now he's the keeper down there. So that's a lovely connection to keep going. It's always good to find out how he's doing and how his family's getting on now. So there's all of that. That all built into me to what fishing is all about.
Nice. And you say you've been sort of that estate, let's use that as an example. How have you seen the changes on the river there regarding hatches and the actual quality of the fishing, the water and everything else that goes with it? Have you detected changes over that period of time?
I think that's an interesting question. It has changed, and I think some of it has come about because landowners change, or landowners have different views on things. And I think a lot of them, some of them could probably benefit from listening more to the guys who are the eyes and ears on the ground, i.e. the keepers and the guys who work on the estate, because they're the ones who are seeing stuff day in, day out. And they're the ones who are talking to the clients, and they're the ones who are talking to the anglers. But I think the work that a lot of these guys are doing now is absolutely fantastic. And, while there have been some changes, I think generally the keepers are on top of it. Their ultimate goal is for us to go and have a fantastic day's fishing. And they work very hard to do that in everything, from weed cutting through to, habitat restoration and creation, through to conservation efforts, through to just keeping the banks clean and tidy, and it's nice occasionally. There's one or two little stretches where they tend to leave it a little bit wilder, and that's really lovely as well. Manicured lawns are absolutely beautiful, but every now and then it's nice to get down and dirty a little bit. And I'm not one of those people who gets too much access to really wild streams and places. And I need to do more of that, because I'm starting to appreciate that as I get older and the more I fish. And I really do. That's something I would like to aim for a little bit more. And I think that that's where the real skill of management of rivers comes in, because you have to keep it wild and untamed, but equally you have to keep it in control in some way.
Nice, good answer. And I got a sense as well of lunchtime, and it sounds as though we are similar. And I know when I fish my friend Warren that we have this sort of arms race about lunch, although he's sort of taken control and brings some really nice lunch from a farm shop that is local to him. I get the sense that you're similar, that can be, I don't mean it's sort of, 28 glasses of wine and falling out the thing, but it's more of a leisurely sort of, let's catch up and let's talk, and we put the world to rights over many issues. And I know I was mullet fishing with my friend Perry on Tuesday, I think it was, and we did similar, we had a breather and just talked about stuff that wasn't really fishing related. I get the sense that's important to you too, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, one of my good fishing buddies is a chap called Jonathan McGee, who is a photographer and filmmaker, and he's based up in Yorkshire. So when we get together, we probably haven't seen each other for a few months. It's always good to have a natter, because we're both in the media side of things. There's a lot to talk about. We've got mutual friends, mutual clients actually as well, and people we work alongside. So there's a lot to catch up on, as well as just swapping a couple of good stories here and there. I think he's in Norway catching daft-sized fish at the moment, so there'll be a lot to catch up on when I see him next. But yes, we both tend to bring some decent food, nice bottle of wine, and just spend 3/4 of an hour to an hour just sitting, putting the world to rights, and catching up on all those things that we probably haven't had time to discuss in the preceding 3 or 4 months. And then then we look out at the river and we realise that actually we shouldn't be sat in that hut. We should be out there making the most of the opportunity. So off we go again, and that's where we tend to swap stories about, our tactics and the killer fly of the day and that type of thing. And, there's very much an encouragement thing goes on there as well. If one of us has done not as well as the other one, then there's very much a sense of, like, this one's yours, or I'll never cast into that spot, but I'm pretty sure you will.
Nice. They sound perfect sorts of days with me. Throwing a cigar and I'll be a happy punter as well. So where did fishing start for you? Were you somebody who, grew up sort of fishing and made the traditional route in via coarse fishing and then picked up a fly rod a little bit later? How did it all begin for you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was very fortunate in a way. I grew up a few hundred yards away from the River Thames in Greater London. So my brother and I, none of my family fished. I think a mutual family friend had an old fiberglass fishing rod that they just wanted rid of. They gave it to me, and so I just took it down to the river to see what I could do with it, which wasn't a lot, to be honest. A couple of eels and a couple of roach. And then I was walking along by a very famous stretch called Cambury Gardens, which is around the corner from where I lived, and I saw this chap pulling out he just caught a huge bag of dace. I just watched him catch fish after fish, and that was it. I thought, I really want to get involved in this, and I could see all these fish coming out, and in the evenings I'd see fish topping, and I just thought, I want to catch these. So my brother and I would go down and we'd catch roach, dace, bream, eels, and then sort of I guess when I got into my teen years, girls and alcohol took over, and I sort of moved away from it a bit and found lots of other things to do, and then started concentrating on get a real job as well once my exams were out of the way. So I didn't really come back to it till I was in my mid-20s, and I'd do it occasionally because there was a river around the corner from where I lived, and I'd do it. And that's kind of how I got into it. But then once I made a transition from newspapers, which is where I'd started out, into magazines and specifically into fishing magazines, because there was a stable called David Hall Publishing, which was around the corner from where I lived at the time. So I was fortunate there was an editor's job going there. David interviewed me and allowed me the opportunity, and that got me into learning about all the other fishing styles. And so one of the guys, when we launched Today's Fly Fisher, or Total Fly Fisher, they then started taking me fly fishing, and that's how I got the bug.
Nice. Yeah. It sounds almost sort of really that sort of traditional route, isn't it, from coarse to game? And then often there is a point where people say, actually, yeah, the fly rod's for me. Are you one of those people, or do you still coarse fish as well with a normal sort of standard setup?
I do everything really. Yeah, I still coarse fish. I've got a little boat on the Ouse, and the marina there is packed with perch. So in the winter, it's great to put a lure through there, get some of the pike and perch. I can take the boat out onto the main Ouse and catch some roach or whatever, and that's quite nice in an evening. And I will do a little bit of carp fishing occasionally, although not too much. But if I have to choose, if somebody said to me, tomorrow you can go fishing, where are you going? Then I'm picking up a fly rod every time, because it's just something I love. It's that sight fishing side of it, I think, in particular. I love grayling fishing, and I really enjoy my grayling fishing. But there is something to me about watching a fish rise and catching it, whether that's a trout, whether that might be a carp on a still water somewhere, in the summer. Seeing those fish, targeting them and catching them, that's my heaven, really.
Nice. That sounds fantastic. You talked about journalism as well, which is fascinating to me, because when I was growing up, it was the route I wanted to go, and I was too badly behaved at school, I think, for that. Although I think possibly if I had the right teachers, it may have made a difference, and it's funny where you end up eventually, sort of thing. But, and in those days, it was that I would handwrite a letter to a newspaper and see if there was a chance to get some experience and everything else. Is that, I think our timelines are relatively similar in that sense. Was that how that began for you, and how did you know that journalism was a route that you wanted to go in?
It's funny. I was always interested in it. I think I'd seen stuff on TV. I'd seen people interviewed, and below their name on the caption, it always said journalist. And I thought, well, this is good because it opens all sorts of doors. I was into my English at school. I was into my drama, and actually, that was my plan: was to head off to university and do English and drama. I don't say I was badly behaved. Maybe I wasn't well applied, or maybe exams didn't suit me, but I didn't do as well as I thought I was going to do to get me to university. But I did know that there were also journalism courses that I could go on. And so that was always in my mind that's what I wanted to do, was something in the media. I actually wanted to be the presenter of Blue Peter, to be honest, but I never actually got the opportunity to do that. And I'm probably still frustrated about that to this day. But I think I did enjoy it. To me, writing and the media was always something I was interested in. So I did my journalism course, got my qualifications, came out and followed the well-worn career path for a journalist of cub reporter, senior, chief reporter, news editor, and then up to editor. I set myself a goal of being editor of a newspaper by the time I was 30. I managed to achieve it with a year to spare. And it was kind of, what do I do now? So I started looking around to see what else there was. And at the time, newspapers were starting, there was a decline in ad revenue, there was a decline in circulations. So I went looking for other ventures and found one with David Hall Publishing.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear that route and to hear how you were obviously successful. Was that difficult, being an editor of a magazine at would be perceived such a young age?
There were always a lot of youngsters coming in, and a lot of the old hacks. And the phrase tells you all you need to know. There were a lot of older journalists who had been around the block a million times, and I swore I never wanted to be that. And the youngsters coming in had more of a grasp of culture, of where the current sort of lifestyles were. They also had a better grasp of technology. When I started, I was still writing articles on typewriters, but within a year of being on newspapers, we were fortunate enough to have been approached by Apple to test out their very first desktop publishing system. Because I got involved in computers at college, and I was one of the first ones, one of the only ones at the college to embrace that technology, it really excited me that we could look at what at the time was new technology, i.e. computers and desktop publishing, to actually produce something. So I felt very fortunate to have that opportunity. And the youngsters, so it wasn't quite the same sort of stigma about having young people higher up, because we were the ones who were understanding that technology, and we were the ones leading it. Not necessarily me, but all of my sort of colleagues. We were all at the forefront of that. And I feel very fortunate to have been in at that time, because that undoubtedly helped me push my career forward.
Interesting. I was thinking about what you said about the computing, and I did a similar sort of thing. I did a computer programming course, although there were no computers. So we had to fill in little cards with a lead pencil, each command, as it were, send them off somewhere. In about a month's time, you'd get a result. And if you hadn't erased where the cards had been used previously, the program wouldn't work. And then we went to see a computer system, I think it was Access in Southend, and the computer was the size of a house. It was extraordinary. We'd just not seen them. And so, what a massive change. And I was thinking, again, this is bringing back so many happy memories, that I started on a typing course, and I did a correspondence course for journalism and all these sorts of other bits and pieces. And it's amazing how, as you say, that must have been a game changer when Apple suddenly released software that revolutionized the industry, I guess, didn't it?
Yeah, and so we were very fortunate that the newspaper that I was on, it was a family-owned paper, and when they were approached, the owner Peter actually said, yes, this is something I think we need to look at, particularly as they were going to give us a load of free Apple Macs to trial out the system. And we were at the start of that revolution. There were some downsides to it. Within a couple of years, we'd had to make a lot of staff redundant. All the comps and so on who used to do all that side of it, they were no longer needed. And that started the road to a huge change within the industry. And it started on that, the technology came in and it did put a lot of people out of work. And that was a really scary moment when I saw the axe being swung with lots of friends and colleagues. That was quite an eye-opener for me. And it probably hastened my departure from newspapers because I didn't really like where that was going, given where I'd started, which was in the old Hacks newsroom with a fog of cigarette smoke and alcohol around, and a load of old guys who really knew their stuff.
Yeah, that's lovely to hear. That's how I always pictured and visualised a newspaper room would be. So thank you for that. You mentioned that you joined David Hall Publishing, and I met David once or twice, and he was a passionate angler as well, wasn't he, as well as being a publisher. And you went to help set up Total Fly Fishing. I think it was the first time, wasn't it? And how was that moving from newspaper to magazine? Was it much of a change for you? Did you have more time, I guess, in that it wasn't daily, it was monthly at the time?
It certainly felt like I had a lot more time. Obviously, we had to spend a lot more time on the bank actually constructing features. I couldn't rely on news to come in, and I couldn't rely on going out and news gathering. It was all features, which is something that I probably hadn't written that many of. I was very much a news reporter for a lot of my early life. So to learn how to write features and to construct things was quite interesting. Working at David Hall's was very interesting. My interview was done at 5 o'clock over a scotch, which anybody who knows David will know that was probably par for the course. And I think the advert I actually replied to did say on the bottom, teetotalers won't find the atmosphere to their liking. And I thought I really ought to apply for this job. And David only saw me because I lived around the corner, so he wouldn't have to pay my travel expenses. That was a mark of, I should have seen what was coming from that. But I think, I started off editing. We launched a magazine called Let's Go Coarse Fishing, which lasted a couple of years, but it was a victim of its own, or David Hall's was a victim of its own success. That was a general coarse fishing magazine, but we had specialist carp titles. We were launching a specialist sea fishing magazine. We were launching a specialist fly magazine. We had a specialist match magazine, a specialist pole magazine. So if you were an advertiser selling a pole or a fly rod or some sea gear, you didn't need to be in the general mag because you had all these niche titles. And listen, you know as well as I do that niche publishing is actually a really good market to be in, because you have passionate people who really understand. Fly culture is a perfect example of that. It's a niche market, but it's a strong niche market because what you're producing is a quality product for people who appreciate it. And so that was a bit of a victim. I was a bit of a victim of that, but fortunately, my journalism background meant that I could get involved in all of the magazines, sub-editing them, producing all the style guides for each different magazine and so on. So I got involved as deputy editor on one of the carp mags, got involved subbing the sea mag and the fly mag, and everything else. And at the same time, we also bought a trade magazine called Tackle and Guns, which I think we'll probably come on to later. And that got me into the trade side of the business, which was absolutely fascinating. And that really did flick a switch for me in terms of where I felt comfortable.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for the kind words about fly culture. I greatly appreciate that. And it felt to me at the time as well, and I know it got going initially with Andy, but I'd like to do a shout out to Tim Smith and Steve Cullen, because I think what they did when they were each in charge of Total Fly Fishing was try to take the model of a fishing magazine and move it on a little bit. And I really think kudos was there. And I would like to hope there's a tiny bit of that within fly culture as well, that, they were trying to look at things from different angles. They were trying to look at newer techniques very, very quickly. And it felt to me as though they really had their fingers on the pulse. Did you sort of sense that as well?
Absolutely. I think when we started all of these magazines, David Hall had a model for how a fishing magazine worked, because it was tried and tested. He'd had his David Hall's coarse fishing, the carp mags were doing well, the match mag and the pole mags were doing well. So he had a template, really, that he thought he could just copy and paste. And that's what we did when we started the fly mag, and that's what we did when we started the sea mag. But what you quickly discover is, as we all know, all of these disciplines work differently, and the people within them are a different breed. Fly anglers are a different breed to carp anglers, or a different breed to match anglers. So what they are looking for and what they are demanding from their publications is something slightly different. And Tim and Steve, who I remember very fondly, the amount of time and effort and work that they put in, and their understanding of having their finger, and the fact that they had their finger on the pulse because they were out there doing it, meant that they could take the magazine in a direction that touched a nerve with all of the anglers out there. The sea fishing guys did the same. The sea fishing magazine changed hugely in the first year or two because we had sea fishing guys involved, and they knew what that market was. And it was certainly the case with Tim and Steve that they knew the guys in the industry, and they knew the anglers, and they knew what they wanted, and they could see these new techniques coming through, and they weren't afraid to give those exposure within the magazine. And David would query it at times, but to their credit, they stuck fast to their principles and said, we're the editors, we know what's going on out there, and we know what people want.
Yeah.
So absolutely, kudos to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the marketplace, you touched on the advertising thing, and, when we brought fly culture, it just, to me, as a new kid on the block, and like you were saying, you touched on even in newspapers, and that really is the barometer, isn't it? That advertising revenues when you left there were starting to fall. So that must have been a little while back. And to me, it just didn't make sense to take advertising because I was worried that if we were new to the marketplace, that we'd probably be the first to be cut if revenues, companies decided not to advertise a little bit more, and so I found that a difficult one, and went a different route, obviously charging a little bit more, but saying, look, we'll be completely independent, which has been great for us in that sense. Do you think that marketplace, the model for that marketplace, is still intact, or do people have to look at things slightly more differently now?
It's very interesting, the business model that the route you've gone down, and I take my hat off to you and Fly Culture for doing that, because it was a very brave move, and I'm glad it's been a success. I really am, because I think it shows things in a different light. I think what changed was we started seeing a lot of our younger guys who we were training being poached effectively by, this is nothing against the rest of the industry, but being poached by some of the big players in the industry for their media knowledge, for their photography and their video skills. And all of a sudden, our advertisers were starting to produce their own publications, their own videos, their own websites and everything else that were appealing to anglers. David Hall always used to say to some of our advertisers, we don't make fishing tackle, so you shouldn't be producing magazines. And I kind of got that, but of course that started blurring. And by the time I left David Hall's, both parties were doing both. And so you had companies producing their own magazines, digital and print. Their catalogues were becoming more, informative with tips and techniques and hints, and articles by their sponsored anglers or whatever, which of course we used to do. And by the end of it, David Halls was actually selling fishing tackle via a sort of affiliate website as well. So the whole thing did kind of go full circle. I think there are still revenues there, but you have to be very careful about how you do it. And again, I think those that are being successful are the ones that have found the right niche. And you have to find that niche in order to do that. If you try and be too general, there's too much out there now. There are magazines all over the world, and budgets are being cut more and more. And you've got to work very hard now for that. For that money.
Yeah. And it's an interesting one, and you'll know from being on the inside, is the paper cost thing as well. And, our last two issues, the rise has been I think it's about 21%. I'm saying that conservatively because of various reasons. Do you think that's going to be a factor for people as well now looking ahead? We're going to sort of hold the price for as long as we possibly can, and we'll continue to do so. But there will come a time, it may be a year, it may be 2 years, that we have to look at it because it's just becoming so expensive. And because it's the printing costs as well, we pay our contributors as well. So there's that factor, and we try and pay them as much as we possibly can. And I want to try and continue upping that. But with paper costs, that's becoming an issue for us. Do you think that's going to be something that's going to make life a little bit more uncomfortable as well for the publishing industry?
Oh, definitely. There are two factors within that. The cost of paper and print will only continue to rise, as indeed the cost of everything else appears to be continuing to rise. With Tackle Tray World, and actually I guess you have the same thing with Fly Culture since you posted, with Tackle Tray World, we're sending out 18,500 copies to 120 odd countries. Now that gives us a bit of a headache in terms of transportation costs as well. And certainly during the pandemic, the paper costs and the transport costs were going up weekly. And I mean weekly. I was sitting here with emails every week saying, guys, we need to get this one done by so-and-so because that cost is going to go up. Now, I still believe there is a future in print. Our rival publication to Tackle Tray World went digital during the pandemic and has kept that way. I still believe there are a huge amount of people out there who love to be able to leaf through a magazine at their leisure. Believe me, if I could get 18,500 industry professionals to take my magazine digitally and cut thousands off my expenses every month, I'd do it. But the fact is, they don't want it. They want the physical magazine. They want to be able to pick it up, put it down, and everything else. You can look at a publication online. I would love to know how many people actually read a magazine cover to cover online. That would be really interesting if there was, to find that out, because I believe that print is not dead, and I believe that people will always want that. Yeah, you can read stuff on your tablet, you can read stuff on your laptop and on your phone. To me, it's not the same. Leafing through the pages, the smell of it, the feel of it when you get that new magazine. I don't care whether it's a trade or a consumer publication. There's anticipation of what am I going to find within these pages that I don't think you get when you click on something. That's my personal opinion. Maybe I'm old school, but the fact that you're doing it, the fact that there are still print magazines out there, tells me that there's still a market for it.
I'm with you on that. And it's interesting you talked about the pandemic and a company going digital during the pandemic. That to us was primo time because people had time on their hands and they wanted to read stuff. And that was really, if there is anything to be said about being a good time out of that, there wasn't, but people wanted to, like you say, have something in their hands that they could pick up and read. And it was, we were selling one, and we generally soft sell that. We just put it out on social media, and if people find us, they find us, that's great. But we found people were buying one and then coming back, and whatever we had left in stock of the other ones, they would come back and buy because they physically wanted that in their hands. The other interesting point you make is about delivery costs as well. And like you say, there's that. having it delivered to us has gone up exponentially. This is pre the fuel costs as well. Transportation costs there went up quite dramatically, as you say, and they were going up all of the time. There were no lorry drivers, so they put the prices up. So all of those things, and then postage prices continue to rise. Brexit as well, as I'm sure you're aware as well, we send around the world as well. In some countries, getting them through customs, there is one country, and I'm having a conversation with somebody at the moment, that it is difficult to get through sometimes, despite how we mark things and everything else. So, somebody wanted to be charged 20 euros to pick up a £9 magazine, on top of the price they're paid and the postage, and it's just ridiculous. Yet it gets through other times. So that's a frustrating process. So there's all these things in the background that we're all having to contend with, aren't they? That you're sort of, it looks elegant and swan-like, but as that old saying goes, you're sort of pedaling like mad under the water, aren't you?
Absolutely. But one of the things that gives me hope is the fact that as anglers, yes, we can read magazines, we can watch videos online, but the fact is we like tangible stuff. To me, things like shows and that type of thing, where you can get as anglers, we are hands-on. We love to touch, feel. The feel and the balance and the action of a fly rod is when you look at a fly rod, you don't just stand and look at a fly rod or a match rod or whatever. You pick it up, you cast with it. It's that physical connection, and to me, it's the same with the magazines that we have and that we produce as well. And actually sitting there with the magazine, holding it, looking at the pictures, reading the story, reading the article, to me, there's a connection there that I think we're very fortunate in the. We're not the only industry, but certainly as anglers, we love to touch and feel and have stuff in our hands. That's what we do.
Yeah. And, this segues beautifully on to Tackle and Guns, which you were with for 17 years and then helped set up Tackle Trade World. For our listeners, because obviously if you work within the industry, they will be familiar names, but can you tell listeners a little bit about Tackle and Guns and then subsequently Tackle Trade World and what they do and how they serve the marketplace?
Yes, absolutely, Pete. I think Tackle and Guns was really the industry magazine for the UK. So it served the fishing and shooting trade. So we would go out. The magazine would be sent out to manufacturers, distributors and retailers. The manufacturers and distributors or wholesalers would be the ones who would be advertising in it. The retailers would be the ones picking up the phone to place the orders, having seen the ads or having seen the write-ups about the products. So we exist to put manufacturers or suppliers of fishing tackle in touch with retailers of fishing tackle. And we do that. We did that in Tackle and Guns and shooting gear as well in Tackle and Guns. We ran a very successful trade show for 16 of those 17 years on Tackle and Guns, which a lot of the industry came to, and that was brilliant over a couple of days to see all the new product and to see everything that was going on and to connect as a networking opportunity within the industry. And Tackle Trade World has exactly the same model, except that we are going out around the world to 123 countries. So if you are the joke I always say, if you are a manufacturer of fishing rods in Brazil and you want to sell your fishing rods in Azerbaijan, for example, we can help you do that. That's what we do. We go to all these countries, and by writing about the products and by placing your adverts, you can connect with those guys. There is a digital publication online, and we send out e-shots, and our social media is very active. So we have to use all channels. We're not just print, but the key to it is being able to be that touch point for somebody in one country looking to connect with somebody else. And that's what we do. We connect the industry, and that's what we did with Tackle and Guns for fishing and shooting in the UK, and that's what we do for Tackle Trade World. And people got it very quickly with Tackle Trade World. Sean O'Driscoll and I, when we wanted to start Tackle Trade World 20-odd years ago, we actually went to FTEX, the big European trade show, with an A4 sheet of with an A4 piece of card. And on one side was a front cover, and on the back side of it was a rate card. And we went and we explained the concept, and within a couple of weeks, we had a backbone of advertisers and a load of articles and a database. And it went from there. And 20 odd years later, I'm back in the hot seat editing Tackle Trade World again, having had my time on Tackle and Guns and everything else, and moving away to my own business as well. So it's been interesting. The industry has changed a huge amount, but we're still here.
That's great to hear. And, the hashtag after news as well is print's not dead. And that's exactly, it's wonderful to hear that as well. And, I remember going back, because Tackling Guns pre-internet, really, you would hear if somebody had left whatever company to go to another. That's the first place you heard about those things. And so, like you say, you've experienced big change within the industry. I'm guessing the internet is the biggest change that, from a retailing point of view, and like you say, the way that you can reach people in a different way has changed. Would I be right in thinking that?
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things. It's cyclical as well. 20 odd years ago, the big change in the industry was mail order, and people being able to buy, instead of going into a tackle shop, being able to buy all your kit via mail order. And that changed the industry hugely. Now, mail order has morphed into buy online. And that has changed things again with the advent of technology. As you say, we can all find lots of different touch points. We can buy our tackle, we can find out about it, we can read the reviews, we can watch our favourite anglers using the kit. We can be transported to amazing destinations all around the world without having to go and do it. And that has changed the way that we all have to work and the way that we all have to think. And you have to think smarter, but you use those media to your advantage, using those connections for your own publications or your own business. But equally, it presents opportunities. We couldn't have launched Tackle Trade World without the internet, because I had correspondence in Europe, I had correspondence in America, I had correspondence and sales guys in America, I had correspondence in Australia, and so on. So email and the internet allowed me to get those articles and the advertising from them very quickly and efficiently, without having to wait weeks and weeks for stuff to come via the postal system. So that really, we couldn't have launched Tackle Trade World any earlier than we did because of that, because of those global connections that started. And now it's like falling off a log. My sales guy on Tackle Trade World is Dutch. He's based in Sardinia. We meet up once in a while, but most of the time we're on a Zoom call or whatever. And that technology, same with my American guys and the guys in Europe, and that makes a huge difference to what we do. So that's allowed us, and it means that it's a global marketplace for everybody. If you're a fishing rod manufacturer in the US and you want to reach anybody in the world, put your stuff out there, and anybody can access it. You don't have to travel to the States to do it or wherever else. So that has changed hugely, and I think that has made the industry better in many ways, because we've all had to adapt and grow, and we found all these other opportunities. Digital social media platforms, and we're now using them in a way that I'm sure they were never originally designed to be used for. But we're out there doing it. The videos that we see on YouTube and everywhere now, TikTok is now being used by businesses, which is amazing. And actually, they're actively promoting that. And there are so many ways to get your message out now. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that has been for us, I think, because of the selling direct route. And that was one of the other reasons that it felt to me as though I had to keep a margin simply so that I could afford print costs and afford to pay people as well. And by stocking in a newsagent, that margin would be rapidly diminished, and that makes life a little bit more complicated. So yes, we can reach people in a different, wider way. I've tried my utmost to embrace TikTok as best as I can. I certainly am no dancer, so I don't know that many people would like videos of me flicking through the magazine, river dancing or something like that. But all of those things have allowed us to be able to do that. And I've gone the other route, really, from a digital magazine to a hard copy one. So although we had a following, I think that probably helped a little bit as well. Certainly when we announced it, that made life a little bit easier. So we had subscribers coming in from the very beginning who'd read the online magazine, and we were able to do it that way. So it kind of made it interesting from that point of view. But it's a fascinating marketplace that seems to be, it's ever shifting, isn't it? And like you say, TikTok now and all these things, you feel like you've got to at least have a basic understanding of them to be able to let people know about your product, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be nice to find a bit more time to go fishing, to be honest.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, we're going to move on a little bit because you also are involved in the Angling Trades Association. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please, as well?
Absolutely. So the Angling Trade Association is the industry body for the UK fishing tackle trade. And we exist really to to support the industry, to lobby, come up with best practice and industry standards and so on. And that's something that the ATA has been around for many, many years. But it had kind of lost its way until a couple of years back. And Andrew Race from Reuben Heaton took on the chair a couple of years back. And, with Mike Halin and a really strong little working group there and a knowledgeable board made up of a lot of the major manufacturers that everybody will know, really managed to sort of grab it by the horns and pull it forward. So I work on the media side of it, and I'm fortunate that there are lots of different things that we're now doing. So the lobbying and understanding, things like the rules around packaging, the rules around bait in Europe that have recently changed, the constant threat to lead and lead weights and so on. These are things that we're on, and phthalates and so on. We're on top of all of that, and we're keeping an eye on it. We're talking to the people at the top about what's happening and what's coming down the line, and working with the industry to work out whether we need to change our practices or whether there's something we can do to change the legislation or the regulations that may come in. There's a lot of challenges there, but equally we exist to serve the industry and encourage new people into it. So the ATA owns a couple of brands. One is Take a Friend Fishing, which allows somebody with a rod license to take a friend and get a free rod license for them for the day. The last of those, we run a couple of those a year. Christmas is a good time, and we've just run one during the Queen's Jubilee in the week leading up to the Queen's Jubilee. And the other one that people will probably have heard of is a wonderful thing called National Fishing Month. Now that kicks off August 1st and runs right through to 31st of August. And clubs and coaches and waters are opening up their doors. And during that time, people can come along, learn about fishing, whatever type of fishing it may be. We have fly, we have sea, we have coarse, we have carp. And you can go along, you can find out all about that throughout the whole of National Fishing Month. I think at the moment, there are 700 or 800 events already penciled in. There'll probably be more. And so that's a brilliant way to get new people into the sport. And crucially, we keep an eye on who those people are coming in. And if we can, we take some details and there's follow-up to keep those guys involved in the sport. Anybody can set up an event and people can come along and try it and then they disappear and you never hear from them again. But what the Canal River Trust and the Angling Trust and the Environment Agency and the partners that we work with, one of the key strengths is that we try and get that information and follow up so that we can retain those anglers when they started.
That's a really cool thing for people to, like you say, to encourage angling across all disciplines. And, sometimes we all know about these events, but we may not always know who's behind them. And it's encouraging to hear ATA is responsible for this as well. And it's important when we're thinking about tackle, isn't it? And I guess the industry is under threat from other places trying to undermine the tackle industry. That's the only word I can use to describe it, because that to me is how it looks. I will not, for one, support it. But that's how it looks. But, when we're paying a tiny little bit more, if it's going back in, that's no bad thing, is it?
No, and this is one of the lovely things with the ATA is that the key players are quite prepared. The ATA charges a subscription fee, to be a member, but obviously that money then gets used, to allow us to do these initiatives and to allow us to lobby and format best practice and standards and everything else. A lot of the roles within it are voluntary at the moment, in order to make sure that the money is used in the best way. But the big players and some of the smaller players are actively supporting us financially as well, which allows us to do all these wonderful things, because we're doing it for the future of the industry and the future of the sport. And to my mind, having been in the industry for 20 odd years, it's about giving something back.
I like that. There's nothing you can say about that. That's summed up absolutely perfectly. And I hope, it makes people aware of some of these things that are going on in the background that we know about, but what the thought process behind it as well. So I think that is wonderful. Now, you talked about having no time for fishing, but we're moving on to the bloody game fair now, and you organise Fisherman's Row. So that must be time consuming. I don't know how many hours in the day there are for you, but that must be a time consuming process for you as well, isn't it? And a challenging one as well.
Yeah. It is challenging, and obviously, the Fisherman's Row has morphed into kind of a fishing village, with a lot more content for visitors who can come and learn a bit more about angling, or again, opportunities to take it up or try it for the first time. So there's a lot more on the content side of things. In terms of time, one of the beauties of all of the things that I do through my business, Hunter Media, is there is a synergy between a lot of the things that I do. So when I'm talking to somebody, I was at the Sea Angling Classic last week, working on the trade media side, but equally I was doing the trade media side for that. But I was talking to people about Tackle Trade World. I was talking to people about the ATA. Anybody who asks me about the game fair, I have information for them. And so actually I can work across all of those different platforms more or less at the same time. So if I'm talking to somebody, then a couple of those might well fall into that remit. But the game fair is an interesting one. The CLA obviously sold it back in 2016. National Game Fair Limited, that's now Stable Events, they took it on, and the fishing side has been given a bit of a boost. I'm working more on the content side now, so their association stands as a little fishing theatre. We have our casting pools with Hal Morgan and Tanya and Marina Gibson and everybody else, people, and Scott McKenzie and everybody else who people will know. And they're always good fun. We've got coarse fishing tuition down on the lake is a precursor to National Fishing Month. So the Canal and River Trust are doing some coaching down there, so you can come and pick up a rod and try fishing for the first time if you haven't done it already. And let me tell you, that lake is stuffed with carp and silverfish. And actually, between you and I, they're great fun on the fly rod in the evening when I'm down there as well. So that's always good. And we've got AAP guy down there doing some casting tuition, and we've got the British Fly Casting Club down there running some competitions as well, which actually will go into a grand final because the Game Fair organising team also run the Scottish Game Fair and just launched the Welsh Game Fair. So people who are taking part in the fly casting competitions, distance and accuracy, from Scotland and England and Wales can qualify at the end of the Welsh one for a grand final. So there's so many different things going on. And if you are a half-decent caster and you fancy your chances, there's some great prizes. So I'd look at the Scottish that is next week, come along to the Game Fair at the end of July. I'll find out about the Welsh that's in the middle of September. And yeah, if you're a half-decent caster, you could be in with a shout of a good prize there.
That sounds great. I have no claims to fame, but one of them is that I measured Scott McKenzie's world record somebody said, "Oh, can you go and sit in the boat and measure?" And I saw this line go flying over the top of me, and that was Scott's one. And I managed to measure that one. So that's one of my tiny claims to fame. Where is the English one held these days? Where and where is the Welsh and where is the Scottish as well?
The Scottish is up at Scone, and that's next weekend. The Game Fair is at Ragley Hall in Warwickshire. It was last year, and it probably will be again next year. And that's the 29th, 30th, and 31st of July. And then the Welsh is mid-September, and that's on a beautiful estate called Vaynol Estate up in North Wales. And as I say, the Welsh is a new one for us, but we've detected a lot of interest. And actually, when you look at the heat map for people who come to the Game Fair, a Welsh one is a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest. And the Scottish one, of course, has been running for donkey's years through the GWCT, the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, and we are now working with them on that. So, yeah, lots and lots going on, but that just makes it far more fun. And as I say, I'm fortunate in that I have lots of touch points to lots of different things through what I do that mean that a simple phone call probably isn't a simple phone call. There's several things I can touch on at the same time, which is always good.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you've been in the industry 20 odd years now, and taking the Game Fair, and I've worked on stands over the years on the Game Fair and casting and everything else. How have you seen? Has there been a change that you've detected over that period of time? And has that meant, since you've been involved with it, that you've been able to bring in change to what you feel is on the pulse of what's going on in fishing right now?
Yeah, I think so. There has been a big change. I mean, Fisherman's Row is a lot smaller in terms of exhibitors than it was 10, 15 years ago. Part of that goes back to what we were just saying about the internet and the ease of access to fishing tackle nowadays. You don't have to go and waggle a rod at a game fair anymore and buy it there. You can look at something and then disappear off and find it online. So there has been a lot of that, which is why my focus over the last few years has been more on the content side, to give people something to see or do or meet some of these, guys within the industry and talk to them, to be able to sit down with Charles Jardine or Marina or, catch a word with Howell or Scott is quite a big deal to a lot of people. I had a chap approach me last year, and he said, I've always wanted to learn to fly fish. And it was somebody I know, and he said, I've always wanted to learn to fly fish. How should I go about it? Who's the best person to teach? And I just called over to Charles Jardine, who was standing just behind me, and said, Charles, this chap wants to learn to fly fish. So Charles said, great, meet me in half an hour by the casting pool and we'll go through the basics. And those are the type of moments at the Game Fair that I love, is watching people get inspired because somebody who should know better, somebody who really is going out of their way to give somebody that time, because they can see somebody there who is the future of the sport. So that's what we want to do, is we want to get more people involved in fishing, really understand the enjoyment of it, and understand the benefits as well. And that's one thing I'm sure you've touched on with some of your other guests over the last few months is the health and well-being benefits. We had a chap called Dave Lyons from Tackling Minds come down last year as well. And Dave is the guy who managed to get fishing prescribed on the NHS. Now this is very important. When we're standing in the middle of a beautiful estate in Warwickshire, how can you not feel calm but inspired to be out there in nature? And that goes back to where we started, I guess, about talking about my ideal day. And it's being outside. It's being on the bank with friends, having a laugh, sharing a glass of wine, and connecting with people and connecting with nature. And that's, I think, where we all converge, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've talked a lot about mental health on here and how fishing has helped people through difficult times, and it will always continue to do that. Even sometimes if you're aware or not even know, you're unaware of these situations, but what a lift going out fishing for a few hours can be. And you know, when you come back, how much better you feel as a result of it, and how excited you are, or how, you know, it's been good or it's been tough, but it doesn't matter because you've been able to get out on the water and enjoy it. And I think that's one of the reasons we keep coming back to it. But I wanted to talk to you. You said sort of, you know, you getting time to actually go fishing. If you could go anywhere, I'll give you 2 destinations. You can have a freshwater destination and a saltwater destination. They may be places you've been to before. They may be places you haven't, you've dreamed of going to. But what would those 2 places be, and where would you choose? I've thrown that one on you. So where would it be?
Oh, God, wow. I think from a freshwater point of view, I'd love to fish. Some of the rivers out Montana way or somewhere like that, just because I think that would be a different style of sort of fishing, and there's so many knowledgeable people out there, and I do love the US in many ways, and I haven't spent as much. I've spent time there with shows and events, and I need to spend a bit more time there from a personal point of view, because I just think there is so many different aspects to it. So I think somewhere out there would be absolutely fantastic, and I've got some good friends at places like Sims and so on, who I know would be wonderful hosts as well. So there's that type of thing. Equally, I forget the name of it, but there's a lake right on one of the highest lakes in Wales that I've walked past a couple of times, and I can never remember the name of it, but I've always fancied a little dabble in there just because of the fact that it's so remote and out of the way. But certainly somewhere out west in the US would be on one of those iconic rivers would be really, really good fun, and would give me some some lasting memories, I'm sure. In terms of saltwater, I've been lucky enough to do some bone fishing in the Bahamas, which was great fun. I think anywhere down there, Cuba's got a little bit of a draw to me, just because I've done a bit of bone fishing, but really I feel that I need to up my game and perhaps find some tarpon and permit. And I don't think I'm in Grand Slam territory at all, but it would be really fun just to know that the opportunity was there. So somewhere like that. But to be honest, because of the lack of destination fishing I've done, anywhere would be a bonus. But I think I'd be hard pushed to beat somewhere like Cuba or maybe Belize. It's a very difficult one. Anywhere out that way, just to get out on the flats, feel that warmth, feel that wind, and pull a few flies. I'm not precious about it. I'm really not. To me, that's that. Again, it's about being there and having those feelings, those smells, those sounds going on around you, spotting a tailing fish. Those are the things that would drive me, and I don't care where that is. To be honest, it's a bit of a cop out, but that would be where I'm at with that. Is the fishing is the destination, not the destination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. And Sims, you said you had some friends out there. The Gallatin isn't a million miles away from there, which is a magnificent river. While I'm on it, actually, I know I have listeners in the US, and I know the terrible floods they'd had on the Yellowstone. So my thoughts are with you. I know the Yellowstone well, and I saw news footage of bridges being washed away. So I hope that in some way is help is getting there, and in as best it can, that life is getting back to normal. Another shout out, you mentioned the Welsh High Lakes. Kerry Thomas has written an excellent book about fishing in Wales and those lakes and stuff, so I'm sure it's in there. So a shout out, that's definitely worth a look. I bought a copy, and it's a beautifully put together book as well. And yeah, tarpon, I think that's the one. I really do think that's the fish I could get something for. I just like how difficult and tricky they are to hook. yet the power and strength of them is something really special. And I'm getting that itch again as well. Funnily enough, I was looking at a Cuba trip, which I'd like to see it and experience Havana as well. And of course, there's the cigars and everything else, which is of interest to me. But another place for slams is Mexico as well, which may be worth bearing in mind as well, which is a great place for that. But John, we've been talking over an hour now, and it's been fantastic. We've covered so much ground. We've looked at so many interesting topics, and it's given listeners, I think, an opportunity to look at what goes on, within the trade, how publishing works a little bit, and about you as well, which is really important. How, if people want to find you, how can they find you or find the publications and associations that you are involved with?
I think the easiest way would be to have a look at my own website, which is hunter-media.co.uk. But thegamefair.org will give you all the details about the Game Fair. TackleTradeWorld.com will give you all the details about that. And anglingtradesassociation.com will give you all the information about the ATA. So if you're in the industry and you want to know a bit more about the association and the work it does for you, and hopefully sign up, then that would be great. But please visit any of those for anything that might be a touch point for you. I'd love to see some of your listeners at the Game Fair. And, if you're in the fishing village, just ask somebody, or bound to point me out, and come and say hi, and come and have a go at some of the things that we're doing there, because it's all good fun.
Right. We're lucky to have people like yourself, John, in the industry, and thank you for that. Thank you also for taking the time to talk with me today. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. And as I say, I being in publishing for so long, I appreciate all the work that other media in the industry do. It's not easy. It's time consuming. And also sometimes you need to break the mold a bit. And I mentioned it before, I take my hat off to Fly Culture magazine, because it's broken the mold in some ways, and I look forward to it when it turns up. And so, yes, kudos to you guys as well.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, Pete.
Everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and as ever, there will be plenty more coming very, very soon.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.